Welcome to the Data Profession Academy. This video is a part of our Data Analyst playlist, where we cover everything you need to know to become a data analyst. We will post content every week, so stay tuned. Today is day one of our content. Today we will talk about the exciting world of data in our Introduction to Data World section. We will learn how to think like a data analyst. I will also show you some examples of how data is used in the real world to drive business decisions. Let's jump into today's session.
Today, we will learn about what data is, what data career looks like, what sort of different data careers are available there, and what does a data professional do, or how does a data professional think? And that's probably the most important part, is learning. If you're given any problem, how do you start thinking from the data professional's perspective? And that's the key thing we will learn today, is try to understand how a data professional think. Okay, so let's jump into the content now. First thing, obviously, what we need to know is what data is. Okay, the definition of data is evolving every day. So previously, we only used to think that data is some numbers or some spreadsheet where you have rows and columns, and you have data in those rows and columns. That's used to be like a common thinking about data. But with all this evolution, with all these advances in technologies, now everything has become data. For example, you guys are attending the meeting today. That's also a data. Some guys are not attending the meeting. That's also data. And you are looking at this screen. So your screen time is also data. You are moving your mouse here and there. So that pattern of your mouse movement is also data. You probably are wearing some watch, so your heartbeat is being tracked. So your heartbeat is also a data. Everything you can possibly think of is now being treated as data. You post something on your social media, that's another data point. Someone likes on that social media, that's another data point. Someone sees your post and does not like it, that's again another data point. So data is just almost everywhere. And that's what makes it really interesting, trying to find that data that maybe no one else ever thought about using, or no one else actually thought that it existed, and turning that into meaningful insight. That's what data professionals do. So if you were just normal data that everyone saw, that normal spreadsheets and what, then turning those into meaningful insights, that's like a normal thing. And even the AIs these days are good enough to turn those things into insights. But what a true data professional can do is identify those data points that no one ever considered before. That's where the majority of the value comes from. It is from those existing data as well, but it's the ability to find those data from those unusual places and make it useful. That's one of the biggest strengths, or that's one of the biggest quality of a data professional, is the ability to uncover or find those interesting data points. That's why the world through a data lens is that for data professional, the world is full of data points. And that's why you will explore every nooks and corners of it to find those exciting and interesting data points and turn them into meaningful insight. Data professional is not like they will just wait for someone to hand them the data. That doesn't make you a data professional. A data professional should be able to identify where that data, how to get it, and how to turn it into meaningful insight. And that's what we're here to learn, is how to identify those interesting data points that probably are sitting just in front of our eyes, but we are failing to identify them. And the role often involves merging different data points. So you will probably use some of the data that you already knew and existed, but you will create some data points from some different sources that no one else thought of, or you try to combine two different data sources that no one else ever thought of combining. And there was a quite interesting example I found on LinkedIn one day, and it was from India. So someone was planning to apply for a job in a company, but finding the salary label of people in that company is a bit hard, right? Because people don't advertise about, the company doesn't advertise about the salary label. People also don't really post about their salaries on their LinkedIn or like any other portal. But what she found that was people actually list their occupation and their salary in matrimonial sites. So what she did was she looked for that company in the matrimonial sites and she found the salary data from there. And that was quite interesting because, yeah, people probably don't go to matrimonial sites to try to find the salary for a company, right? Or what are the salary labels for a company? But she tried and she actually got it, right? And that's the interesting thing. And that's what being a true data professional is about, is trying to find those unique places or different places where the data might be there or interesting data is there, and try to combine that and get a meaningful insight. That's what looking at the world through the data lens means. You are always trying to find those interesting data points that you can convert into meaningful knowledge and insights. And that's where the curiosity of data professional comes in as well. So if the idea of discovering these kind of new data sources and uncovering those hidden insights excites you, then that's exactly what a data professional needs. And if you have that curiosity, you will make a really good data professional. Okay, it's not about your technical skill. Yeah, technical skills are there. You need to learn those tools and stuff, but it's the mindset. If you have got the right mindset, you can learn those tools. And yeah, because those tools, when you are applying for jobs and when we look at average data analyst versus a good data analyst, they probably know the same tools, but the good data analyst is a good data analyst because they have got this kind of curiosity and they have got this kind of perspective of looking everything through data lens. Does that make sense? Let's talk about data versus information versus knowledge and the evolution of value. Okay, so this is really important to know the difference between what data is, what information is, and what knowledge is. Okay, so what is data? Data is, at the most basic level, is the raw collection of facts and figures. Okay, so everything that we talked about previously, like those social media posts, likes, heartbeat, your purchase history, whatever you can think of, those are all data, right? So they are just raw. They are just the collection of facts. And in itself, the data has no value. So your purchase history in itself, it doesn't benefit anyone. But when someone analyzes that purchase history, maybe that's you. So you yourself analyzing your purchase history, and you found out that there were some costs that you can cut. Now that becomes information, and that will be of value. The purchase history in itself, it didn't have any value. But when you analyzed it and converted it into information, and then use that information to drive some decisions, which probably will be like, yeah, I probably don't need to buy this too much, or I can buy this from some other place where it's cheaper. And then that you are now generating value from the data. So there is data, which is just the raw collection of facts, which doesn't have any value on itself. But when you analyze it and use it to drive a decision, that's when it will generate the value. And this is the journey that data analyst has to travel. So a data analyst has to be able to take a data, convert it into information, and that information should drive a decision. Urging people or urging other people to make that decision is also data analyst's job. So your job is not just to produce insights. Yeah, you'll probably produce insight. You'll probably produce charts and KPIs and numbers, whatever it is. But if you cannot convince the other person who needs to make that decision, then it's of no use. Right? For example, in the same case, like when you were doing your own analysis of your purchase history, if you can't convince yourself that, okay, you need to do cost cutting on this item, is the analysis useful? Did it generate any value? No, because the decision was not taken, not even decision, the action was not taken. Because unless you take an action, nothing really happens, because the analysis in itself doesn't generate value. It's the action that generates value. That's why the first part is from data to information, that's analysis. From information to action, that's the communication skills. And there's the data storytelling and communication that we definitely focus on in the later part of our course. Yes, now you have got that analysis, but how you can convert this analysis into action? Who do you need to convince, and how would you convince it? Convincing them also needs those evidence and facts to support it. And you can't go to someone and say, hey, you need to do a cost cutting on this one, or you need to stop buying this. you need to have an evidence backing for that claim that you are making. And that's where the analysis comes. I hope that's making sense. So that's where the data versus information versus knowledge comes in. So if you were to plot a value axis, let me see if I can draw it. If this was the value axis, so let's call it this is value. And if we go down this way, the value increases. So if that's the case, then data will be on here. So this is where the data will be, because data in itself doesn't have any value, because the raw data doesn't give you anything. But information will be somewhere around here, because now you have analyzed the data and you have produced some information. You have produced some trends, some patterns, and things like that. But knowledge is somewhere around here, because knowledge is something that people can act. Okay, so based on this information, now I can maybe deduce some actions saying, okay, this is the pattern I'm following. This is something that I'm spending too much money on. Let's try to reduce that cost. That's what knowledge is. And that's the thing that gives you value. Not information alone, but the knowledge is what gives you value. And I think we have got an example here as well. Okay, yeah, there you go. So for instance, consider a retail company which are tracking every customer transaction. Think of like Kohl's or Woody's, right? So every time you scan an item, that is being tracked, right? So they know what you're buying, what you're not buying, all those things. So these records by themselves don't tell the company much, right? So you are buying 10 items or you buy this and that item. That data in itself doesn't help that company much. But let's get into the information now. So in the same example, let's say that the company found that the average basket size for each customer is decreasing. So previously people were buying 10 items together. Now they're just buying 8 items together. So they found that trend. And that now is somewhat useful, right? But in order to make it fully useful and generate the value out of it, now they have to add something on top of it. And that's the domain experience. So what they did is, in this scenario, the sales manager, who will be the domain expert, they interpret the information and they identify that the store's BYO bag policy happened around the same time that the trend went down. So for instance, maybe they launched their BYO bag policy in September and the average basket size started to decrease since September. So now they know the root cause that, okay, yes, because we're not giving people bags, they can't really hold much items on their hand. So obviously the basket size will go down. So what they did, and now is the action time, right? Because if they just know that thing and don't take an action, again, it doesn't give any value. So what the action could be is, armed with this knowledge, the store introduces a reusable bag for $1 or whatever it is. And that will probably help them, again, increase that basket size, right? So this is a typical example on how data becomes information, and then information is now combined with those domain expertise to convert into knowledge. And that knowledge is what we take actions upon, right? So the action was taken, the store introduces the reusable bags for $1, and then that gives them the outcome, the value. So this is the timeline or the progression of the data. And that's what, as a data professional, you need to be aware of. It's your job to get it from data all the way to knowledge. Most of the time, it won't be the data analyst who takes the action. It will be someone else, like a store manager, business owner, or CEO, or whoever that is, who can take that action or make the decision. It's also the data analyst's job to persuade them to make that decision. How do we persuade them? By backing our claims with evidence showing that this is exactly the time when you introduced the BYO bag policy, the trend started to go down. So we need to do something on it. And then the action will be taken, and then the business will get a value out of it. I hope that makes sense now with this example. This is another example that I have taken out from the recent immigration report as well. I believe most of you are international students, so If you are interested, you probably are familiar with the recent immigration changes that they are trying to reduce the number of years on your temporary graduate visa and all the other changes. But the data behind all of that migration policy changes was this. And I got this screenshot from their immigration report itself. So this was the data that they acted upon. Right? They had the data, which was like how many students, how many graduate students they have, how many of them are working in related jobs, how many of them are staying here a long time, how many of them are switching courses and all those things they have data about. And they converted that data into this knowledge. And then this knowledge was acted upon and they proposed changes in the Immigration Act. And now we have seen that it's already been implemented from July 1, and we have already seen that in action. So that's a true example of data in action is they had the data, they brought it into information, they converted that into knowledge. They brought in a lot of domain expert. There was actually a skill conference they did in Canberra, and that was the process of converting this information into knowledge. So the information probably said that, okay, this is the trend, like this is the trend of students coming in, students switching their courses. This is the trend of student staying in temporary graduate visas and all those things. They had those trends and analysis, and they combined that analysis with domain expertise in that skills conference. And they got some recommendations and actions, which was later implemented in the Migration Act. So this is how you can see a lot of government reports and government actions that you see will always be backed by data. And if you look at their reports, you will actually see how the data was collected, how the data was used, and how the decision was made. And this is, again, one of the things that I will recommend to everyone who wants to become a data analyst or any analyst where reporting is necessary, reporting is useful, is have a look at other reports, because that's where we learn from, right? Because this is probably like the highest level or highest impact report that you can find. So if you can read that and see what process is followed, then that will help you build your own reports as well when you become a data analyst. These are the kind of things you need to look out for. There will be a lot of reports from governments. There will be a lot of reports from those accounting firms or those consulting firms as well. They produce a lot of reports. Even private companies, they produce a lot of reports like annual reports and some reports on their different projects or whatever they are working on. So it's really good to look through those reports and see how data is being used in there. And that will give you a really good idea of, okay, I never thought this kind of data can be used for this purpose. Or, yeah, that's a really interesting use case of using this data for driving this decision. So that's how I would encourage you to learn. And again, like we're not talking about tools and everything here. We are here to talk about this mindset. And that's the way to develop your mindset is obviously by seeing what other people are doing. And in this case, not even other people, it's other organizations or other government bodies. I highly recommend you to find these kind of reports and have a look through and see how data actually is used in real workplaces. Now talk about what makes a good data professional. Because we are here to become a data analyst. So let's learn what makes a good data professional, a good data analyst. It's not being good with the tool alone. A good data professional will have these qualities. Data professional deals with data on a daily basis. And it's not just about numbers and algorithm. It's about the individual who breathe life into the figures, transforms them into actionable insights. But let's see what sets them apart. So how does a good data professional looks like versus what the rest of the professionals look like? The data professionals are problem solvers because as a data analyst, you're not hired to analyze the data. That's probably what the job responsibility says, but you are analyzing the data to solve a problem. So the problem is always the key thing here. It's not what analysis you can do. It's not what graph you can produce. It's about what problem you can solve. At the core, data professionals are problem solvers. They don't just dive into data. They first understand what the business challenge or what the business problem is. And the value always lies in solving the problem. The value doesn't come from a fancy graph or a dashboard. The value comes from solving a problem And a good data analyst always knows that. They always try to understand what the business problem is and then try to build a solution for that. Always look at things from problem solving perspective. Not here to just analyze, we're here to solve a problem. And maybe when we're doing the analysis, we can probably uncover even more problem, because when we look at the trends, maybe we uncover that, yeah, we thought that there was problem one, but there is also this problem too. And now you will try to solve those both problems, because yeah, you just uncovered this new problem with your analysis and you will need to solve it, because only the solution of a problem gives us value. As a good data professional, you need to make sure that the data that you're working with is of high quality. Because if your data is not good, you can never produce good insights. Because as the proverb goes, it's garbage in, garbage out. So no matter how good analysis you do, if your data was rubbish, if your data was bad to begin with, your analysis will always be bad because it's on wrong data. So you always need to be an advocate of data integrity and data quality. And that's something that people expect you to say in the interviews as well. If you're going to an interview to become a data analyst, and you never mention the word data cleaning, or you never mention the word data quality, then they will doubt, have you actually worked in the real world scenario? Because in the real world scenario, the data quality is what matters the most. Because yeah, if you don't have good quality data, nothing else matters. No matter how sophisticated AI model you build, if your data is not correct, the output will not be correct. So always keep in mind, data quality matters the most. So that's the second trait of a good data professional. And again, these are the kind of things that people or the employer will notice when selecting their candidates. So yes, they know the tool, but are they problem solver? Can they communicate well? Do they know about data quality? Do they value data quality and all those kind of things? That's what differentiates a good candidate from an average candidate. And an average candidate never gets hired because they were only looking for one person. And obviously, if there is a good candidate, they go for a good candidate. So we need to become that good candidate, not the average candidate. So the first thing was problem solving. Second thing is data integrity advocate. So being able to advocate for the data quality, or knowing that the data quality is what matters the most. Third is evidence-based decision maker. So always ground your conclusions on evidence. Don't go for just for gut feeling. Sometimes, yeah, gut feelings are okay. But even when you have a gut feeling, you still need to back it up with data. I can't just say, go and build another franchise because your franchises are doing good, but maybe it won't do good in that suburb where we are trying to open the franchise. Do I have enough data to support that? No, but maybe I just have a gut feeling. Maybe I know that suburb and then I just said it. But as a data professional, I cannot do that. Every recommendations that I make has to be backed with data. As a data analyst, we provide suggestion to C-level executives, we provide suggestion to high-level managers, and there can be multi-million-dollar decisions that are made based on those suggestions. So you have to be extra cautious that you are making suggestions based on data alone, not on your gut feeling. Yes, gut feelings are always good. Like you have to have some gut feelings, but you need to have some data to validate that gut feelings. In our upcoming sessions, we will dive more into statistical analysis. What are the kind of statistical tests you can do to back your recommendation? For example, if you're saying that, okay, we should close this franchise, what are the numbers you have to support that? What kind of test you have done to support that? So we learn all about that, the necessary testing that we need to do to support our plans. And so we've gone with problem solving, data quality, and evidence-based decision making. So next up is data storyteller. So this is where the communication skill comes in. No matter how groundbreaking analysis you have done, no matter how pretty your graph is, if it is not communicated efficiently to the decision makers, then nothing matters. If a decision is not made, if an action is not taken, your analysis does nothing. And that's why data analyst has to have a really good communication skill. So you can do your analysis, but you also need to be able to sell your analysis. It's like a sales skill in that term. It's because you have done something, you have done this analysis. Now you're trying to convince someone to take action based on this analysis. You are selling your idea. So your idea is that based on my analysis, we need to grow this franchise. So you're trying to sell this idea to whoever is going to take that action. So you're your own sales person in that case. Data storytelling is a technique, or it's more of an art. It's an art of communicating insights from your data in a cohesive and persuasive way. So your story has to be cohesive as well, which means it has to lead towards the same recommendation or same action. You can't be like, okay, we can also do this, we can also do that, and 10 different things. Then what are you trying to say? What are you trying to sell here? So it has to be cohesive, and it also has to be persuasive as well, which means it should be telling that person to take action. And that's what data storytelling is about. We had got a separate data storytelling section where we talk about all these kind of things, how to make your story cohesive, how to make your story more persuasive, what kind of visuals to use, what kind of story to use, all those things we learned in the data storytelling section. And knowledgeable and confident. So every time you communicate your insights, or every time you're trying to propose something, it's normal to get setbacks. It's normal to get questions. Why? As a data analyst, you are probably trying to propose a solution to a problem that is maybe different from what they had expected, or maybe different from what they currently used to do. And that can happen because data will tell you the truth. The data will suggest that, okay, we need to stop doing this and start doing that. Now you are presenting this recommendation, which could be quite strange to your audience. So you need to be prepared for those hard questions. Where does answering those hard questions come from? Is by being knowledgeable. So you can obviously there is data to back your claims. Obviously there will be analysis to back your claim, but you can also expand it and say, okay, because company B was facing the similar situation as well, and they fixed it by doing this. So we can follow the similar practice because our data or our trend is similar to their trend. So it's not just about your analysis. It could be from other examples and other whatever you can get your hands on. You can combine them and present it to back your claims. And that's what being knowledgeable and confident means. Is you just don't rely on your analysis itself. You need to expand, or you need to broaden your knowledge and be knowledgeable on what other people are doing in similar scenarios and all those kind of. And how do we become knowledgeable and confident? That's the last point, is by becoming a continuous learner. Learning never stops. I guess true in every profession, but especially in data field, it just never ends. Because there probably will be like new technology that's coming in. Maybe there is new trends coming in, whatever it might be. You always need to be up to date with those new advancements, what others are doing, because things change quite often. And not just those technologies and things. As a data professional, you also need to have some understanding of the regulations. For example, you are handling sensitive data, and then there probably is a regulation on sensitive data saying that, okay, the sensitive data cannot leave your laptop, or you cannot make a copy of sensitive data when you are doing the analysis. You need to be aware of those regulations. And then there could be things like which are applied countrywide. So there are some data regulations on Australia. For example, health data of any Australian citizen cannot leave Australia. So you cannot make a copy of it somewhere, even for analysis purpose or anything. And those kind of regulations can change. Maybe tomorrow they will say, okay, not just the health information, but also purchase history information of Australian cannot go outside Australia. If that regulation comes in tomorrow, you need to be on top of that as well. Because maybe you are doing some analysis, maybe you are creating some copy. Now you need to stop creating those copies because the regulations have changed. that's the kind of thing you need to stay up to date with. And that's what being a data professional is about. Right? So you have to be knowledgeable, you have to be up to date, and the learning never ends. So how does this help me like right now? If I know this is what a good data professional looks like, then this is exactly the thing my employer are looking in my resume. So now I will take this information and I will try to implement it in my resume. So in my resume, I will start thinking about how do I present myself as a good problem solver? I need to work out on that. Second thing, how do I present myself as an advocate of data quality? I need to work on that. How do I present myself as a good data storyteller? How do I present myself as a continuous learner? How do I present myself as knowledgeable and confident? Those are the things I need to work on, because before they see me, they only see my resume. So my resume need to tell them that I am a good data professional. And only then you get the interviews, and then you can take on the next step. But first thing is you need to make them sure that looking at your resume alone, they can tell you that, okay, this person will make a good data professional, or this person will make a good data analyst. And that's the intent of this. That's why I'm teaching you this, or I'm going through this topic, is you need to know what your employers are expecting. Because otherwise, how do you know whether you are doing good or bad? Let's talk about mindset of a data professional. And again, like this helps a lot when you are pitching yourself, because you are here to become a data professional. So you need to learn how to think like one, because when you think like one, you become one. And that's probably a lot of the missing piece when you are trying to do your self-learning, when you are trying to learn a tool to become a data analyst. Is yes, you can learn those tools and technologies, but it's really hard to learn the mindset. And that's what differentiates between a good data analyst and an data analyst. So let's start with the mindset. The first thing, obviously, you always start with a problem. You do not start with the data. It's not, okay, I have this data in hand, what can I do? That's not going to work. Yeah, if you're talking about your personal projects or projects for your uni, maybe that will work that way. But in the business world, no one cares about what you can do with that data. What people care about is whether you can solve a problem or not. So data, starting with data, that's always the wrong assumption. And that's the thing. Even when I was at uni, that's how I used to think. I always like, okay, what data do I have? What can I do with this data? And no one really cares about what I can do with that data. They will care about their own problems. So instead of that, what I should be looking for is what sort of problems are out. For example, maybe I'm interested in transportation. So I go out, and it could probably come from my own experience as well. Is, okay, every day I use trains and buses. What are the problems that I face? Maybe that problem is I don't know how far away the bus is. So if I am using that service every day, there probably are some problems that I face every day. And now I will start with that problem and then think about, okay, what are the data points I might need to solve this problem? So then I will start looking for the data. If I can't find the data, I will maybe talk to people, talk to other organizations to find and help me get that data. But getting the data in the hand is not the starting point. The starting point is always identifying the problem. And yeah, there probably are some problems that you cannot solve with data alone, which is fine, because yeah, not all problems can be solved with data alone. There probably will need to be some software changes, and there's a lot of other kind of changes that needs to happen. So not all of problems can be solved with data, but when you're thinking about your project, or when you're thinking about anything to do, to start with the problem and how you can solve it. And next is the data acquisition. So quality matters. So now you have identified your problem. Now you go into the data acquisition phase. So data acquisition means just getting the data. And maybe there are a lot of different sources that I can get the data from. And that's where I need to factor in the data quality. What would be the best quality data, or where I can find the best quality data? Okay. For example, let's say I want to do mean income analysis of all Australians. So let's imagine this scenario. I want to calculate the average income of all Australians based on different suburbs, right? So I want average income of each suburb, like this suburb versus that suburb and all those kind of things. So I want to do that analysis. And now I'm trying to find the right data for that analysis. So can anyone tell me where could be the best place? So there probably are different places we can get it, but where could be the best place to get that data from? Any ideas? Yep. ATO, that's correct. In this scenario, there are a couple of ways we can do it. Right? So there is Australian Bureau of Statistics, which does the census. Right? So when they do the census, and in Australia, census is mandatory, so you cannot skip the census as well. So you can get this data from Australian Bureau of Statistics, which does the census, where you report your incomes and all those other details that they ask you to fill out. So that's one way we can obviously get it from Bureau of Statistics. The other way is Australian Taxation Office, because everyone need to do their taxes, so they obviously fill out their income. Between Australian Bureau of Statistics and ATO, which will have better quality data? So it will be ATO, because in ABS, you are self-reporting, right? So you're probably just putting yourself in certain bracket. I mean, you don't put in like my income is 95,036. You will just say it's between 85,000 and 100,000 and something like that. And that is self-reported. So it's not necessary that I need to put my right information. Even if I make 100K, I'll probably put in as like 80K in ABS, and no one really checks that. So even though you can get the data from ABS, you know that it is self-reported, and yeah, people can report whatever they want. But in ATO, it's not self-reported. It's actually enforced, and it has the data maybe up to the cents. I think ATO will have your income up to the cents so that it can do the tax calculation. So ATO's data will definitely be of really high quality compared to the ABS data. So that's just an example on showing like, yes, you could have data coming from like different data sources, but as much as possible, you have to get the data with the highest quality. And in this example, like obviously ATO is not going to give us the annual income of everyone, right? If we're just normal people. If we work in ATO, maybe they will. But as a normal people, we cannot get that data. But as a normal people, as a public, we can get data from ABS. So if you want to see the average annual income of your suburb, you can actually see it in the Bureau of Statistics. So sometimes there can be constraints that even though you know that the high quality data exists, you just can't access it. So now you have to work with the best available data. Right? So, and then the best available data maybe is just ABS. So that way, sometimes there will be constraint to get some data. So you have to work with what data you have. But the gist is you always need to look for the highest quality data available, because we talked about it previously. It's garbage in, garbage out. If your data quality is good, your analysis would not be any good than that. And the power of exploratory analysis, sorry, that's a typo. The power of exploratory analysis. So before you dive deep into your deeper analysis, what a good data analyst do is they always do some exploratory analysis, which is like a quick check. For instance, if I want to do the same example, I want to do the average annual salary of a suburb, then I will do a quick check and see what the distribution looks like and how many data points I have got. If I got less data points, maybe the average won't make much sense because, I don't know where that data point came from. So I will keep that in mind, and I will do that exploratory analysis to quickly check how the data is, what the distribution looks like, whether there are any anomalies, whether there are any outliers in the data. I will quickly do that analysis, because after that, when I do the deeper analysis, which is probably I'm building some models, I'm probably building some pattern findings and all those kind of things, I don't want to spend much time there if the data is wrong. So this is my first checkpoint in saying, is this data enough or sufficient of good enough quality for pursuing the later analysis? And that's why it's called exploratory analysis. And we actually have a session dedicated to exploratory analysis itself, where we talk about what sort of checks you need to do to make sure that you have got the right data and sufficient data for your further analysis. And this is like really helpful, especially in work terms as well, is because if you skip this, you will spend quite a long time on doing those analyses on wrong data. So it's better to find out 1 month earlier than finding out 1 month later where you have done all these things with the data, but you find out that the data was wrong. So that's what the exploratory analysis prevents, is to wasting your time on something when the data was not there to begin with in the first place. So that's the exploratory analysis. And again, a good data analyst would always do that exploratory analysis before they do the deep down analytics on anything. And deep down with purpose. So when you do that deep dive analysis, you have to have a purpose in mind, because otherwise it can take forever. Because analysis is like, if you don't have an end goal, it can go on and on. You try to do this thing, it doesn't work. Try to do other thing. You're trying to combine more things. And if you don't have an end goal, it just goes on and on. So keep that final purpose in mind. And what's the final purpose? That is driven by the problem that we started in the first place. So we're not doing this analysis for the sake of the analysis. We're doing this analysis to solve that problem. So that will be your purpose, and keep that purpose in mind all the time when you're doing the analysis. Otherwise, this analysis will go nowhere and you will waste a lot of your time. And if you're in a company, you will waste a lot of their resources. From information to actionable knowledge. So again, if we call back to our discussion on data, information, and knowledge, once you are done with your analysis, you produce an information. That's not a knowledge on its own, unless you have got the domain expertise as well. So what you need to do now is the information that you got from your analysis, you now need to combine it with domain expertise. And again, if that's the domain you're already expert of, you can probably do that stage yourself, or you will probably engage an SME or the subject matter expert on that topic. And now you and the SME will have a look at the information and they will produce the knowledge. And that's the knowledge that will be presented, or that's the knowledge that will be acted on by the decision makers. So in your early stages as a data analyst, you probably will only be doing that information, creating the information part, and you probably will have some SME or maybe your senior analyst who will provide that domain expertise to you. But later on, as you become more and more experienced in that domain, you will be responsible for the entire thing. And that's why a lot of the jobs, if I look at analyst positions or senior analyst position, they will say, if it is in a mining company, they will say mining experience preferred. If it's a banking company, banking experience preferred. Why is that? It's because the information alone is not enough. You need that domain experience. And when they are coupled, that becomes knowledge. And that's what they're looking for, that they want that knowledge. So that knowledge is acted upon. Right? So that's why when you become senior, you come with that domain experience as well, because you probably have been an analyst in that domain for some time and you know that domain well. So you will be able to do that part, both part on your own. But when you're starting with, you will produce the information and you will need to work with subject matter expert to convert that into knowledge. Because some of the assumptions in your analysis could be wrong, or the kind of different weird pattern that you're seeing, maybe there's a different explanation for that. Maybe it's in the business operations. Maybe it's the seasonality. There could be a lot of the things that is not in the data, but still it explains what's happening there. And that's what the domain experience is. Information, that's what we produce from analysis, but the domain expertise comes from outside, and then that's what makes it the knowledge. And reflect and evaluate. So this is, again, really important one, is once you are complete, once you're done with your project, once you're done with your work, always reflect and evaluate. And in workplace sense, there will be like formal rituals for these called project closures, retrospectives, and all those kind of things. But in your personal projects and your personal work as well, you can implement that. Because during the process of doing the project, you learn a lot. Right? By the end of the project, if you stop and reflect, okay, now if I had to do this project again with all the knowledge that I have, maybe I will do some things differently. Because there probably were some learnings that you did during the project that will definitely help you if you were redoing this project from scratch now. And if you note down those learnings, or if you just take a note of what things you could have done better and what are the learnings you got from this project, you can use those notes to then formulate your next project. And that will be really great because you did one project, you learned something from that, and then now you're implementing that in the next project. And this is how the corporate world works. They do one project, they close it out, they take the learnings, and then they do next project. And then that way the project keeps getting better and better. And they refine their process and procedures to make it better and better. But we can do that on our personal life as well. I'll probably start with a small project. I will do it maybe in 1 or 2 weeks. But after that 1 or 2 weeks, I will stop and reflect on how I can do it better, or how, if I were to start this project again, what are the things that I would do differently? Take note of that. And then when you start the next project, you will do those things differently. And that would be a better project. Okay. So that's the mindset of a good data professional. Is starting with a problem, making sure you have got the good quality data, spending some time in exploratory analysis so that you don't waste your time on doing those deep dives. When you are doing the deep dive, keep in mind what your purpose is. And that purpose is driven by the problem that you started in the first place. And obviously marrying your insights with domain expertise to convert it into knowledge, and reflecting and evaluating upon completion of your project. So that's how our data professional should operate. Okay. And hopefully this will help you in your personal level as well. Even when you're trying to do your personal projects, these steps will help you get better projects.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.